Welcome everyone this week to 60 minutes of what we like to call unscripted .NET discussion. Each week, the .NET Docs show features a special developer community guest. This week we have Claire Novotny with us. Thank you very much, Claire, for joining. But let me take a step back from that and sort of explain the meaning of the show name, the .NET Docs. We get a lot of questions on this. So as doctors of .NET, we examine all things .NET and prescribe best practices, air quotes. Expect a weekly checkup segment and then stick around for this inclusive hallway track. This is sort of what we're offering the developer community in the absence of formal developer conferences in which you would have a formal hallway track. I'm your host, Scott Addy, joined by co-hosts Cecil Phillip.
Hi, everyone.
Cam Soper.
Hey.
And our very special guest for this week, Claire Novotny. Claire, why don't you introduce yourself so everyone knows who you are, what you do?
Thanks. I'm Claire Novotny. I am a program manager on the .NET team, and I am also the executive director of the .NET Foundation. One of my main objectives as executive director of the .NET Foundation is to help grow the open source community and help ensure the success and health of the open source .NET ecosystem.
That sounds like a lot of responsibility resting on one person's shoulders. I admire the work you are doing for the developer community, so thank you for that. With that, Cam, why don't we roll into the checkup segment, and then we'll start our discussion with Claire.
Sounds like a plan, Scott.
All right, so for this week's segment, something closely related to the topic of .NET and open source, we actually have a doc here that is prescribing guidance for producing open source libraries. This doc, for the most part, comes to us from James Newton King, who you will have known from a library known as JSON.NET, aka Newtonsoft.json. The guidance you're seeing here essentially covers 5 main characteristics or pillars of a successful .NET library. And those 5 pillars that will be covered here are libraries that are inclusive, are stable, they're designed to evolve, they're debuggable, and they're trusted. You'll also see topics such as strong naming of assemblies, multi-targeting guidance, so if you need to support multiple flavors of .NET, say .NET Framework, .NET Core, Xamarin, something else, we do have guidance here for those scenarios and how you should accommodate those needs in your library. And finally, publishing the library to NuGet. That's something we see a lot of questions around. Definitely take a look at this library. We have a link, Cam, if you don't mind flashing that banner up so folks can get to that.
It's a weird week, Scott. Normally I'm Johnny on the spot with the banners, and then this week we're just off on our schedule. I'm off on my banners, the whole thing.
Someone's got to keep you on your toes. That's my job this week. Scrolling across the bottom here, we have a vanity URL that you can use to access this doc that we showcased this week. Any comments on this, or should we roll into the hallway track?
I had a question about it actually really quickly. So
Go ahead.
Is this document more governance information, like how do I run an open source project, or is it more from the management perspective of how do I do versioning and, like you said, like supporting different flavors of .NET and those types of things?
For the most part, it's focused on the latter, the actual management of the library. Versioning is a topic in here, as you see in the, or you may or may not have noticed in the table of contents over here. That really speaks to the designed to evolve pillar that I mentioned earlier. Mm-hmm. You will need to come up with a reliable versioning strategy, or nobody's going to use your library.
Okay. I'm just looking in the chat really quickly, and they're saying they can't hear me. I'm guessing the 3 of you can hear me, but folks on YouTube can't.
It's a little low compared to the others.
Let me see if I'm using the right microphone. Did I change it?
Live television.
Gotta love it.
No, this is the right microphone. Maybe I'll turn up my gain on the mic a little bit.
Oh
And-
yeah, it's already better.
Oh yeah, I changed the gain, so that's probably what it was. Okay.
Perfect.
So question for the panel here: Has anybody ever published? Anybody sitting here ever published a NuGet package that actually like gets a fair amount of usage? And I was wondering if anybody had any pain points there. Claire's raising her hand.
Say I published more than a few libraries, but versioning is always hard. So no matter what you do, you're never going to please everyone.
I've never had the pleasure. But certainly I've been on the receiving end of versions and versioning. In fact, we're in the middle of one of those weird versioning things right now. Not necessarily NuGet packages, but like the whole .NET Core to .NET 5 versioning odyssey, for lack of a better word.
So, I guess I do have a question on that for Claire. Is it semantic versioning that you use for the most part, or do you come up with your own sort of versioning strategy with these open source libraries?
So for me, in general, I think semantic versioning is a good idea. It does, for those that don't know, semantic versioning defines a way of indicating major changes from minor changes and patch changes. So if you increment the major version, you would expect a breaking change. Something you can't just recompile it and work. You may have to change your source code somewhere. In a minor change, it's typically maybe I added a new feature, but I can just drop it in, take advantage of some functionality, and it just should work. And in a patch change, it would be a security update or a bug fix, but there really shouldn't or isn't expected to be new features in there. So it makes a lot of sense, but there may be times where a bug fix may impact one person's bug may be another person's feature. So it can get blurry, and like anything, I think that if you understand what the intent is of informing your users about what to expect, like life, everything in moderation. I mean, understand what its purpose is, and then, I don't see anything as hard and fast.
Yeah, it really does feel a lot like a tabs versus spaces debate when you talk about versioning. The biggest question I always hear raised is, well, how do I know when to increment the minor version versus the major version? Does it really come down to breaking change or not? Or is there more criteria?
What I do is because I am a big fan of continuous delivery. I want to make sure that anything I build can be part of a pipeline that is pushed to a continuous integration feed for consumers, and ultimately to the main public feed on NuGet.org. But I don't want to have to check in a version, because that means I have to make a change every time. I want repeatable builds to make sure that whatever I do 5 years from now, I can always go back in time and rebuild exactly the same binary, including all the version information as it was. So in order to do that, I leverage an open source library that's a .NET Foundation member project called nerdbank.getversioning. And what it does is it calculates the patch version, the third portion, based on the number of commits since the last time you incremented the minor.
Oh, that's cool.
And that way, it does it based on and there's a version.json file you check in. So if you want to change the major or minor, you do have to check in a file. And I prefer that mechanism instead of others that may use git tags, because a git tag can be changed after the fact. There's no guarantee that it's going to always be the same thing. But when it's based on the version.json that's part of the commit history, that's much more permanent, short of rewriting history all across the board.
Yeah.
And that way, the third version number is never something I think about. I release libraries as 2.1.147 or something.
Yeah.
And it's really weird at first. You're like, wait, we're so used to seeing that .0. But you just get over it and you're like, it's 2.1 dot something.
Yeah.
So let me ask you one more question on that, Claire. How difficult is it to integrate something like NerdBank? Is it a GitHub action task that's available, or say a Azure Pipelines task that you can add?
I'll say this, it's all of the above. So there's some documentation on the project site. It's available as a .NET Core global tool. It's available as a MS Build task, I believe. It's also available as I think it supports NPM. So you can actually just do it strictly from Node. And it works, I think there's a task within Azure DevOps pipelines, and I know there's a GitHub action. So there's a lot of different ways to use it based on whatever it is you're trying to do.
Very cool. All right, well, so you heard a little bit about versioning and best practices. Claire has a wealth of experience there. But with that, let's roll into the hallway track and have more discussion with Claire.
I really like that music, man. Y'all have better music than I do on my show.
That was a quick bolt to the hall.
That was really our goal, Cecil. Is we need to one-up you. So.
You're winning. You're winning. I'm going to come at you, though. I'm going to come at you.
You heard it. Cecil's coming out swinging at us. Don't hurt us too badly. Welcome to the hallway track, everyone. So we heard in the opening of the show, Claire plays a vital role in the success of the .NET Foundation. And so as a viewer, you might be asking yourself, what's all this talk about .NET Foundation? What is it? Why does it exist? What does it do? Why don't we start there, Claire? Let's provide the audience with some of that background information.
Sure. So the .NET Foundation is a group that is really intended on enabling joint development and of open source .NET projects and ensuring the success of the .NET open source ecosystem. One thing that can be a challenge when a company has an open source project is that it's maybe hard to get collaborators and contributors to it because people may not want to be giving away their time and energy to another company whose job it is to do something else. So by using a foundation as the entity that holds the ownership of the project, it's really more the model of companies and companies coming together to work on a shared owned thing. It also makes it much harder for a company or any one organization to just take the code and go their own way, because the project would continue in the foundation and someone else can come up and continue running forward with it.
So you mentioned going your own way with the project bits, and immediately the classic example of LeftPad comes to mind and what happened over on NPM. How does the .NET Foundation protect us against a situation such as that?
So security and the trust in the ecosystem is a key concern for us. So the .NET Foundation looks to ensures that its projects are code signed, that are that the foundation has ownership over domains and NuGet package IDs for its packages, so that people can trust it. And there's we don't want to have a case where we have another person comes in, maybe a maintainer gets bored, says, hey, I'm done, let me just say, who else wants this thing? And comes in and starts either redirecting domains or starts putting, sneaks the code in to the NuGet package unaware. So everything we do is trying to ensure that the supply chain can be trusted.
So let me to that point just a little bit. Scott, you mentioned left pad, and I had never heard of that whole left pad scenario until you had enlightened me and told me about what happened and what that was referring to. Can you? I think our viewers might like a little background on what happened with that project and what the snafu was.
Yeah, so I'm not familiar with all of the details, but in a nutshell, this package that was heavily dependent upon by other NuGet packages, or NPM packages rather, in the Node ecosystem, LeftPad was just unpublished from the NPM package registry. Therefore, taking down potentially, I would assume, hundreds of thousands of websites who either directly or indirectly took a dependency on this LeftPad package.
Well, and as I remember, like there were like some big packages that took a dependency on this one tiny little package. It was like 10 lines of code. It was not a lot of code, but apparently the package maintainer was just like, I'm out, and broke like half the internet.
But I think that was really a turning point in the JavaScript Node ecosystem, where people really started to more heavily scrutinize the dependencies they were taking on. One could assume that the code included in LeftPad could easily be written by their own development team, right? How difficult could it be to pad a string? But who knows? There could be more to the library than what it seems from the surface.
Well, and I'd be more concerned about what's in the package. We've seen more than one example of crypto miners and Bitcoin mining just being, inserted into common libraries, and with JavaScript libraries in particular tending to be obfuscated and minified for size and for performance reasons, it can be very hard to just look at the code and find the stuff that isn't supposed to be there.
Right, and development teams are an easy target here because one of the reasons you're taking on a third-party dependency is you're just strapped for time. You have a business problem to solve, and if that package looks reputable in any way, you're going to just take on the dependency and assume that you're good to go, nothing to worry about.
Yeah, and I think I'm looking in the chat really quickly, and Taras Bua, I apologize if I pronounced your name incorrectly, but a user from YouTube makes an interesting point, and they're asking what to do in a case if your package owner is not supporting the package anymore. Is it fine to publish it with my ownership? And I know for me, I've run into that scenario on more than one occasion across different ecosystems, right? Across .NET and Node and other things that we're using that I needed to fix, or I needed to make a small tweak to it. And it's just not there anymore, right? Like, how do I move forward from that point?
So that's actually a perfect reason for the foundation, where the foundation owns the NuGet package IDs for its projects. And if a project is, if a maintainer wants to go elsewhere and do something else, the foundation can step in and enable the community to continue publishing packages in it, as long as we can find a qualified maintainer for it. Now, that's to say, those are not normal circumstances. Those are, hey, look, the project is gone, it's dead. What do we do? I mean, we're trying to enable continuity here. On a day-to-day basis, though, the foundation does not tend to interfere with the running of projects. So one common thing that is confusing to a lot of folks is that .NET is both the .NET Foundation, which has the source code and has the .NET project. But then there's the .NET team and there's the .NET Microsoft. In fact, I wear two hats. Part of me is the executive director, and part of me is a member of the .NET team itself. And the .NET team is, the foundation does not tell the .NET team or the project what to do. Just like we don't tell any other member project what to do either. We provide many support services to projects. We aim to ensure continuity, things like code of conduct, ensure that the the intellectual property is clean and maintained, and I could go on, but we don't tell projects, hey, you must take this pull request, or here's how to run your project and do this thing over there. We will try and broker communications between folks if they're having trouble reaching the project, but that's a different model than many foundations operate on, but it's just reflecting the realities of our ecosystem.
Right. So then I'd have a question for you then, which would be, if I'm an open source project maintainer and I'm building .NET projects, I have a few folks that are using it, it's on GitHub, I have some licensing and things of that nature. What would be the benefit for me of being like, I want to become a .NET Foundation project? Like, what would I get from doing that?
So member projects get a number of benefits, and we do have a page on our site that lists some of them. So some of them there include CLA management to make sure that any contributions are clean and rights are properly assigned. That's important for organizations that are taking dependencies on your code. Another thing here is code signing. And again, this is one of these things where it's important to be able to ensure that the code is coming from a trusted source and isn't tampered with along the way. Other services that we are looking to offer in the near future are support for documentation. So documentation is one of these things that we all want, and we rarely get contributions on. Like, let's face it, most people who do docs are probably paid to do it somewhere because it's a job, and that's fine. It's super important, but it's not something that on a Saturday evening, someone in their spare time is likely going to say, I'm going to go and write docs for this open source project there. Not likely. I mean, anything can happen.
Well, have you met David Pine?
I would argue there should be a sixth pillar. If you reflect back on the doc we shared related to open source library guidance, the sixth pillar here would be good documentation, or any documentation at all. I cannot tell you how many open source libraries I've tried to use throughout my career where the docs simply did not exist, and I found myself dumpster diving into the bits of code to try and piece things together and figure out, well, what is it that this is supposed to be doing in this particular scenario? Yep. And how do I make it do that thing?
So we're looking to help with that. So we're working on ways that we can hire documentation writers to help with, writing the documentation that is so desperately needed. We're also looking at ways where we can hire UX designers and web designers to help with project logos and any website updates that might be needed, so that you need a cool logo for your project. I don't know about you, but I'm not a graphic designer. I can't really do that. So we want to be able to provide services to projects to do that. And another one, localization, which is super important to be inclusive. How do you do appropriate language translations for any of the text in your library or application? So we want to be able to hire localization experts to help with this, to enable a broader reach, and provide those to our member projects.
But when you're talking about localization, it sounds like you would hire some resources to handle this. So would that be hand translation? Actual humans would be translating, or would you be looking at more of a machine-driven translation?
So, good question. We're looking at human translation because we want to be able to get it right. I mean, for our member projects, we want to make sure that the intent is there and that it's not just, butchered in some weird way, because, I mean, we could all go to our favorite translation website and put those strings in, but I don't think that's going to give us the result we're quite looking for.
Right. And so if I have a project now, so you've told me a little bit about what the foundation was going to give to me as an author. what would I do if I wanted to submit my project now to the foundation? Like, what's the criteria that I have to kind of abide by if I want to join and also still maintain my status?
Sure. So we have a page on our site that describes what the projects need to do. There's a link to submit. And in general, the main criteria are that it's a library that is, important to the .NET community. It's not really, there is some subjective criteria in here that the project committee, which is made up of members that participate and evaluate these things, say, is this a project that would be missed if it wasn't here tomorrow, right? Like, is it useful? Like, are more than 3 people using it, right? So like there is a certain squishy, set of criteria there for that part. The rest of it is much more mechanical. Is it using a permissive license? Currently, the foundation does not allow copyleft licenses because those aren't friendly towards large portions of our user base. So by using, if you're a user and want to use a foundation project, you know that you're safe and clean on the licensing side. So it has to be a permissive license. And for the rest, we will work with the projects to, get them up to speed. They need to use reproducible build settings. They need to enable SourceLink, which is a tool that it connects the library source to their code on GitHub so that it can be easier to debug and validate that nothing changed along the way in the build. There are, projects need to be code signed, and we will obtain and provide a code signing certificate for the project. So that's an expense that we understand that most projects can't afford, can't do, or it's complicated. We handle all of that. We will set up a CLA bot, and we will work with the project owners to, transfer ownership over certain of the other pieces over to the foundation so that, we can just go forward. And we have an onboarding checklist. And then on a day-to-day basis, it's pretty hands-off.
Yeah, so it sounds to me like you take away a lot of that administrivia from being a maintainer. I don't want to deal with certificates. I don't want to deal with, SLAs, CLAs, and all this types of stuff. I just want to write code, and I want to work on my project. I want to push out cool new features, and maybe write some blog posts and some samples or something like that, right? Or maybe I'll have David Pine do it because David does. Or
if you need a website for something like the NuGet Trends project, we can provide Azure hosting or hosting somewhere else, depending on what the needs are. So if there are ongoing operational costs to running the project, that's something we can help with as well. So we want to enable the projects to thrive and succeed and not be a burden on the maintainers.
Sure. So then a question I have now would be, what happens if I'm a project and something changes? So like, what happens if I change the license, or, like what happens when the world is different now after I've already become like a .NET Foundation project?
So in the case of a license change, the project would have to go to the projects committee and kind of explain what it is that is trying to do. The projects committee would evaluate it and, submit a recommendation to the board of directors, and the board would either approve or decline it. The board is elected by you, our members. So it's a good reason for our members to come and join and participate and elect the board. I don't make these decisions. I just kind of help make sure everything gets done, but it's really run by the community members of the board of directors.
And I think that's a good segue to, like, could you tell us a little bit about the board? Like how is the board structured? How does voting happen? Because I think that'll be good for folks that are watching to kind of understand like what that process is like.
So starting about, say, 2 years ago or a year and a half ago now, the foundation changed from a small appointed board of 3 directors to a 7-member board with 6 of them being elected by the community at large, by members would be electing the board of directors. We had our second election this past summer in August, and we have elected a board of directors. As it happens, it was 6 of them this year. And we also switched it to be a staggered 2-year term. So going forward, almost 3 directors will be up at a time for, again, looking towards continuity. And there is an election process that's documented on our website where candidates can submit their candidacy. We had a nomination committee that was reviewing the candidates. And again, this was made up of folks from the community that were not running, that would evaluate the qualifications of the board member. It is an active board, so we do need people who have relevant experience here. Running a foundation is, while it is the .NET Foundation, it is not a programming job. This is all about organization and experience, and like, how do you build a community? How do you drive growth and outreach? How do you program manage? So we need people who are able to do that and have the time commitment to do that on an ongoing basis. And from there on in, the election happened. There's a campaign period, and the board, the public, so the members vote on the directors.
So I actually have I'm reaching back to a comment Claire made a few minutes ago, and Claire was referring to project maintainers not having the funding to do certain things, which leads me to the question of where does the funding come from for the .NET Foundation? And then the second part of that question is, how is that funding used by the foundation?
Mm-hmm. Good question. So the foundation is an independent organization. We are a 501c6. It's a nonprofit trade group. And we survive on primarily from our corporate sponsors and via the membership dues. So we have the corporate sponsors are, AWS, DevExpress, Engine, Microsoft, Octopus Deploy, and Progress Telerik. And it's through their generous financial contributions that we are able to operate on an ongoing basis. I'll say that Microsoft isn't contributing any more cash than anybody else, right? So, it is not a Microsoft-run controlled entity here. And our budget itself is published online. So we actually did that over the summer. We were able to finally get our P&L together and publish where this is going. So we're aiming to be as transparent as we possibly can with our expenses and where we're spending resources. Our single biggest expense, our 2 big expenses are Meetup and legal fees. So Meetup is something that we support, a Meetup Pro network for our .NET based user groups. So we have like 370 of them, some odd, worldwide. And that's another way where we're trying to empower the community to organize and do things with .NET, but not have to, deal with the costs of Meetup. Like, we're absorbing that and I think that's a fantastic investment. I think there's over 300,000 members in all of those Meetup groups combined. So we're reaching a lot of folks. Another thing is legal bills. So an ongoing, set of things that the foundation does is not seen very often are just making sure that the legal questions are answered. There could be questions around, you asked about relicensing. Can we accept a contribution this way? Can we change from that? Are projects defined a certain way? Or how do we define the project to make sure that what we've been doing over the years is properly, is spelled out accurately in the agreements? how is it that we have, like, when we're changing the structure of the foundation to open it up to the community, how do we do that in a way that is correct and everything is reflecting the way it needs to in the system, the corporate records?
So as far as the legal expenses, then are those strictly like organizational legal expenses, or do they get involved in like the licensing and the license terms on some of these projects, or where does the legal involvement end?
It could be both. We certainly have, most of our expenses are for organizational support, but we have had projects with specific questions and specific needs. One project wanted to incorporate a module that was developed from another open source project with a different license. And there were questions that came up of, well, they're both open source, but can we take that code and make it part of our project? And then, I mean, in order to do it right, it required some research and analysis and figuring out, can this actually work? So it can go to specific projects depending on what's needed.
I think that's a good resource for a lot of developers, because at least, I don't know what everyone else, but I know nothing about open source licensing, right? Like I go into GitHub and I click a new project and then I just click like MIT license for everything, right? But I'm sure there's some implications to that, right? Just like there's implications between choosing a GPL license or like some other type of license, right? So it's kind of good to know that on your side, on the foundation side, that there's some support there for open source maintainers to help really understand what exactly am I getting myself into when I select like the unlicensed on my repo.
For sure. And it's also about, again, reducing risk and enabling users, whether it's a school, a customer, another library. When you're taking a dependency on something, you need to make sure that you can trust it and that you're not opening yourself up to risk. So that's why it is super important that the licenses of our projects be clean and thorough. I mean, cross every T, dot every I, because that's what enables us to say, or a company to say, oh, that project is in the foundation. It's, their company's lawyers may still do a legal check, but we've tried to meet we've met the bar there to ensure that everything will check out.
So I'm wondering, Claire, given the differences in popularity amongst the projects that belong to the foundation, are there tiers of support that are assigned to each project? So, for example, if you're looking at a open source project that has 3 million downloads in the last year, is that given higher priority over something that has maybe 1,000 downloads?
No, so once
year?
A project is a member project, we treat each one equally. If a project, whether it's 3,000 or 3 million, has a question, we're going to get to it, and based on the needs and urgency of the issue. But we're definitely not saying, hey, you're too small. I mean, no, we let you in. Once you're a member, I mean, we'll take care of you and provide the full range of services that we can offer.
Very cool. Now, and I guess the next part of where that question was going is, we talked about, how there aren't, different tiers of support, but what is the all-up sort of mission statement for the foundation? What is it that you're really setting out to achieve?
The foundation's core mission, and this is one where the new board has put together a proposal on, how to tweak it and adjust it a little bit, is to, and I'm just going to read it off here, is to build and educate producers and consumers, both new and old, of the .NET platform. We'll grow a trusted open source ecosystem adopted by education, commercial entities, and all users. We will lead by example, creating a worldwide, healthy, vibrant, and diverse OSS community. And in there, I think that really, I mean, it's broad and wide reaching, but it really does speak to the fact is that, we want to make sure that we can provide guidance and best practices, and here's what to go do for people producing projects, for people consuming them. We want new folks and help ensure the next generation. Trust. Trust is everything in this world, and we want to make sure that we're seen and we're helping projects be seen as trusted by their users. And we support all users, whether from students to commercial enterprises and everyone in between. And that we are huge into ensuring a diverse and safe and healthy open source community. And we're going to do everything we can and lead by example in doing so.
Now let's assume that I am a company interested in donating a boatload of money to the .NET Foundation. What does the onboarding process look like for that corporate membership program? So you had mentioned sponsors such as AWS, I think you said JetBrains, Progress, Telerik. What was the process that those corporate sponsors had to go through?
So the corporate sponsors would typically reach out to me, the executive director, and the corporate sponsor committee, which is being led by Rodney Littles. And we'll work with them to understand what it is that their goals are, what is it that they are looking to gain, and how can we ensure that it's a good fit. And from there on in, we'll work through there's a corporate sponsor agreement and exchange the appropriate information. One thing that I will note is that the foundation is not pay for play. A foundation sponsor does not get a vote for the board, or they don't get any extra influence in the foundation. The board is voted on only by the individual members, and that's intentional.
And so you're talking about the board a little bit. I wanted to ask you, based on the membership that you have available, are there different working groups within the board that work on different areas of focus within the foundation? Or how does that work kind of get spread around and split up?
So yeah, absolutely. The board of directors is voted on by the community, but ultimately, in order to scale and get stuff done, all of the real work is being done by these working groups, these committees. So we have one that I mentioned earlier for projects. The projects committee is led by Sean Walker, who is a community member and is responsible for vetting project applications, as well as defining what does it mean to be a .NET Foundation member project? What benefits should there be? What are the technical criteria, some of which I mentioned earlier around source link and reproducibility? And what should be done from a licensing perspective? Anything to do with projects is handled by that committee, and they meet monthly or sometimes more often, and will make recommendations to the board. And more often than not, the board accepts and just kind of goes with, project committee made this recommendation, that's what we want to do. There's another one for membership, which is looking at what does it mean to be a member of the foundation. Bill Wagner is leading that up. And we have one for outreach, which covers everything to do with going out into the community. So everything from meetup to sponsored events, whenever we're able to have events again, and growing the ecosystem is handled by outreach. And we have Jeff Strauss and Sean Wildermuth are leading that committee. The outreach committee has actually been doing quite a bit over the past few months in the virtual user group space. So we've created a program called the .NET Foundation Virtual User Group, which enables existing user groups to scale and reach audiences worldwide without having to be experts in streaming technologies. There's a form you can submit. It's on the website. I think there's a link here somewhere. And then the sign up user group leader would request some information. It goes to a working group of folks here at the foundation, and we'll get everything set up to stream into our YouTube channel through StreamYard, and kind of handle the day of the event. And that's been hugely successful in getting additional exposure and visibility to all the stuff that's going on these days in the community.
Right. And then can any community member, I'm sorry, I was gonna ask, can any community member become a part of the working group, or do I have to be like a paid, .NET Foundation member to come in and help with that?
So that is a great question. We do have the working group members are members of the foundation. So we do want to make sure that folks who are working on this are part of the community. So in order to be a member, we ask for evidence that you are part of the community, and that it's wide ranging. It can be, hey, I've contributed to the existing projects, and you can send us some of the links of your pull requests. Could be documentation. Maybe you speak on .NET somewhere. Maybe you are writing course material or presentations or blog articles. There's a wide range of criteria that the membership committee evaluates, but ultimately, yeah, you do have to be a member to be to kind of participate in those activities. We do have a annual membership fee of $100, and that fee is waived on request for any reason. We don't track this. So if you can't afford it, and I understand that things are tight for any reason, there's no judgment. We don't want costs to be a barrier here, so it's just it's there. So
okay. And one of the things I wanted to do, I'm going to share a link really quickly in the chat with folks. I wanted to kind of call out one of the initiatives I know one of your working groups is working on, which is the I Am.NET Showcase, which I think is a really great initiative. And, I could talk about it, but I think, Claire, why don't you tell us a little bit, small bit about what it is and what was one of the goals of this project?
So the goal here is really to say that, look, .NET is made up of people. I want to put names and faces and, experiences to the things and make it, what are you doing with .NET? What are people, what are the technologies you're doing? What are you building? What cool things are you doing with it that are like, hey, check this out. I just made a trash can open automatically when I push this sensor light over there. I don't know. I'm just making stuff up. But whatever it is, short stories, let's highlight folks and get them on the YouTube channel and on our website, showing just the diversity of everyone doing stuff in the community.
Yeah, and I think it's a great time to be able to focus on that type of stuff now. One, because everyone's home, and two, I found this is a time where we have a lot of learners and a lot of people that are new and getting interested and getting involved in just technology in general. And it's always great for them to be able to see, one, an active community, but also just an active community of people that look like them, right? And live where they live and speak the language that they speak, and just someone that's a little bit more relatable to them as an individual, right? And so hopefully folks that are watching now, again, we've shared the links inside of the chat. I think this would be a great opportunity for all of our guests that are checking us out, and Cam and Scott and me and myself to do a video and kind of just share our our appreciation for .NET as an ecosystem, and also help encourage other people to get involved in what's happening.
Very cool.
Yeah, I really like what I hear with this initiative. I feel like all too often in the .NET community, it seemed like we hear from the same folks over and over again. They're all doing the same old forms over data projects. This could be a great opportunity to see those other more interesting projects that are going on with .NET. Claire jokingly made the example of a trash can that lights up, but I've actually heard of fascinating projects like using Signal R to flush a toilet when a cat uses the toilet. I mean, who doesn't want to hear about use cases like this that extend beyond writing, a CRUD-based forms over data application for a financial services company?
For sure. Hey, and if you are that one that wrote that Signal R to trash can thing, record a video here because I want to see it on our site.
Me as well, and it does exist. I promise you I didn't make that up. I will dig this up and share it on Twitter.
Cam, I feel like that's something you did, man. Are you sure that's not one of your projects?
That is not one of my projects yet. I'll say yet.
Challenge accepted.
Yeah.
I did see the light bulb go on in Cam's head when I mentioned
Nice.
that. So there goes the rest of Cam's day. Cool. One other thing that really stuck with me in the pre-show with Claire was this quote of, "A project is more than its source code." And that really stuck with me because I feel like as developers, we only see the surface of the project. And that surface is the actual code, the bits that we're consuming. But the reality is the project extends way beyond that. And Claire has already mentioned some of the aspects. But again, documentation is one of those aspects that is often overlooked. As someone who helps write content for a living, I definitely do feel like it's one of the more underappreciated aspects of a project. However, that's really what's going to drive your adoption. So
Yes. So yeah, I mean, a project is, code is part of it. It's a starting point. It's the thing that gets produced, and it's probably a binary in .NET for the most part these days. But it's also community. I would say if a project the successful projects tend to have contributors coming around behind a shared vision, a shared initiative to move things forward. There's, help documentation, maybe wikis, samples, websites that go into it. There's like all of that, there's a logo, there's a brand. That's the project. And so it's definitely it's the source code plus the bigger thing. Yeah,
the documentation for an open source project is akin to the owner's manual for the car that you just bought, right?
Absolutely.
When was the last time you actually looked at that or had a need to? It's just more than likely there are some valuable nuggets of information in there, and if you opened it up, you would reap benefits from that. So, all right, we're coming up on about the 5-minute mark for today's show. Are there any closing thoughts we wanted to leave folks with to sort of wrap up what we've discussed so far in today's episode?
Well, I would like to call out that over the summer, we released our first State of the Union blog post to kind of share what is it that the foundation has been doing for the past 6 to 8 months? Where do we see things going? How do we increase transparency? And what is it that you all would like to see? And one of the things that we promised there was to set up a series of quarterly all-hands meetings, which are going to be open to the public, not just members. But the first one of them is going to be tomorrow at, is it 11:30 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. And that will be streamed live on YouTube at the link there, where a board will be there, and it's going to be moderated by Rachel Appel, and we're going to take questions. We have some that we came with, but we want to hear from you. What is it what is your burning question that you're asking to hear from the board, get their opinion, their perspective, and it's your hour, and we're going to answer as much as we can.
I have a question, Claire. So Rachel is a close personal friend of mine. Is she aware that she's going to be doing this in public?
Yes, she is. We've had a prep call.
Okay. Hopefully she'll be on her best behavior.
Yeah, we actually had Rachel on the show. She's a good friend of the show. Actually used to work with her on our team as well. She puts out some great content. Now works for JetBrains, doing a lot of great work over there as well. So I know I'll definitely be tuning in.
Yeah, I think this is a great opportunity, kind of like what Claire was saying, for everyone to come in and kind of share their voice and their feedback. I know there's a lot of times where we are on social media and there's a lot of interesting, colorful conversation that happens. So, instead of just kind of just spouting it out all over, let's try and get together as a community and have like a constructive conversation and really see how we could push each other forward together.
And I can't say we're going to have answers for everything you might ask, but we can take that and get back to you. If there's something that we can't answer right away, that's the thing. We'll try and get to it as much as we can, and we'll follow up with the rest that we can't right away.
Yeah, exactly.
So Claire, a follow-up question to the all hands meeting. Are there plans to do more of this in the future? Will this be a recurring meeting?
Yeah. It's going to be quarterly, and we are going to vary the time of day. So we recognize that .NET is a global community. We started this at, a time that works for, on the East Coast, Europe, and a little early on the US West Coast. It's probably going to be super inconvenient for folks, down in the Far East, in Asia, in Africa, or in Australia. The next time we do it, we'll pick a time where it's, it varies. We'll keep rotating the times to make sure that we can hit a variety of time zones. We also have a forum for questions in advance. I think it's linked on the issue description and for the channel. We'll take questions live. And of course, the video will be available on our YouTube channel going forward. So if you can't see it live, you can always watch it later to see what happened.
So, Scott, I see that we're getting down to the end of our hour. Claire, I just want to be the first to say thank you so much for coming on our show. This is the first time I've actually, I think, spoken to you face to face. I think we've exchanged emails a couple of times or something. So it was very much a pleasure to meet you. Scott, who do we have on deck for our show next week at our usual time?
So Claire actually already mentioned the name, so you will have heard it before, but Rodney Littles will be on next week's episode. My understanding is we will be scot-free next week. So no blue badge Scots next week. It's a good thing for everyone out there. Please do tune in. The topic for next week will be reactive extensions for UI frameworks. I know I'm personally excited about that because I know next to nothing about the topic.
Very cool. He's an awesome maintainer, and I will say that we're working on getting a update to reactive extensions that supports .NET 5. There's a preview that we've shipped a couple of weeks ago onto NuGet, and there's ongoing work. So we will be ready with reactive extension support for .NET 5, at or shortly thereafter of the .NET 5 ship date.
Thank you so much, Claire. Cam already thanked you. I would like to also say thank you so much for making this show happen. We've got some great interactions going in the chat here. Folks also thanking you for sharing your knowledge on the show.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure.
Thank you. I'll toss it over to Cecil for any closing thoughts, and then we'll close things out.
Yeah. No, I think this is a great episode today. And again, I guess it's my turn. Claire, thank you for coming on the show. I was the only one left to say thank you. But yeah, definitely thank you for coming on the show. And, what I would love to tell folks, again, if, go ahead and, be a part of the .NET Foundation, head over to the website, submit a membership application if you can, help out with GitHub issues and suggestions to initiatives. And again, just get involved. A lot of the times we have various remarks about the activity within communities. Well, activity only happens if people do something, right? So, if you'd like to see more happen, be a part of that change and do stuff. Help us do stuff. We can all get better because of it together.
All right. This has been the .NET Doc Show. Thank you again, everyone, for tuning in. We'll see you next week with Rodney Littles. Bye.
Bye, everyone.